Hello, everybody. Welcome to what will probably be the first in a series of not so much debunkings as it is just giving my perspective on something I know a topic about, such as submarines. Today, we're going to be discussing a flat earther known as Mr. Thrive and Survive, who has a video titled "Submarines Can't Work on a Globe Earth, and Here's the Proof." Now, I'm going to share the video, um, try and get through it fairly quickly, but it's 19 minutes, 12 seconds, so about 20 minutes. And with my interjections, it could take about a half an hour to an hour. We'll see. This is my first attempt doing it, so that's why I'm doing it live, just for the fun of it. Figure if I can get through it fairly easily. Well, I won't say fairly easy. If I can get through it doing it live for the first one, I should be able to get done with it. I should be able to do these, edit them where I need to, and put them together quickly once I can get used to it. Now, just a little background, so that way somebody like Mr. Thrive and Survive or Mark Sargent, who I also happen to see has a video like this, or Seventh Day Truth Seeker has one that mentions Mark Sargent. I'll have to take a look at the actual video when I go back to my list. What I'm going to do is not necessarily try to debunk the whole flat Earth theory, although I don't believe in it, nor do I subscribe to it, and I don't think it's a valid hypothesis because they can't, like they say in the scientific field, if you can't predict something accurately, then your model doesn't work and you need to rethink it. So your hypothesis is wrong. We know the Earth to be a globe because of the fact that we can predict things such as the eclipses. We can predict sunrise, sunset. As a matter of fact, part of my training in the Navy doing submarine work was actually navigation. One of those is actually figuring out sunrise, sunset. And you can even narrow it down to the time of your location, given your known latitude, your known longitude, and your actual elevation. With that said, this video is pretty basic. It doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about submarines themselves, but there's stuff in there that he talks about that is wrong or misleading that I feel needs to be corrected. So I've gone ahead and I was going to do this last night, but I'm like, nah, tired. I want to do it when I'm fresher, when I understand when I can understand what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to focus on. So, with that, Mr. Thrive and Survive, I am using your video with your permission. I have linked below in my description panel, as well as the video that you linked, because I agree with you. I think that if we're going to post our content on here, I'm okay with you using it as long as you give me credit for my part of the work, just like I'm giving you credit for yours and any other person who decides to use it. It's kind of my fair use disclaimer. I'm not trying to represent Mr. Thrive and Survive wrongly here. Don't want to bash him. I just want to set the record straight as having been somebody that served on a submarine, dealt with the navigation, qualified submarines, and also understands how they keep track of where they're at and how they use the systems. Now, there are other people on YouTube that can do the same thing. There are other people on YouTube that understand this just as much as I do. There are also people who understand the reactor that we use a heck of a lot better than I do, which is why I don't necessarily discuss anything to do with the reactor. If people ask me, I'd be like, here's what I know. If you want more specific, more details, go talk to a nuke like Steve McRae. Although he wasn't a submariner, he's halfway there. I mean, he was nuke, halfway there. Anyways, on with the show. I'm going to share my screen on this. I am actually piping the audio of the video through my mixer back into my laptop, so you should be able to hear it. I've tested this out. I think I've got the levels fairly decent. If not, I'll remake it later. I have no problem doing that. So we're gonna go to share screen first. Can't start the video without sharing the screen. Now he does have this monetized, so there are ads. I will try to skip them where I can, but some of them do not allow you to. So, all right. Like I said, I'm using this permission because I'm giving him the credit that he is due, as well as the person he cited as well. Let me get this out of the way too.
Hey everyone, Rich Mr. Thrive and Survive. I hope everybody's doing fantastic out there. Just want to introduce the players here. We're going to look at submarines and destroyers in the ocean and the earth and put it all together. And I want to show you how submarines work in the Navy and on the globe and things like that. So here's our players, our actors in this stage. We have the submarine over here on the right, and we have a destroyer on the left. And this is supposed to represent the ocean on a globe model. And of course, we have the clouds and things like that. It's a very bright white day. So wanted to show some good contrast there. So let's get into this, shall we? Now let's look at a couple of the functions of a submarine and how dangerous they can be.
Okay, so I don't want to belittle his animation here because, again, it's animation. It's there for the entertainment in a base description. It's fine. Here we have an image of a submarine trying to portray what it's like to be underwater. I don't know. Well, I'll let him explain.
We're going to look at what steers a submarine and what causes it to achieve something called neutral buoyancy in the oceans itself. But as you can see from this picture right here, sometimes the submarines have to hover barely on top of the ocean floor. This is a lot of the reason why we have the ocean floors mapped out and why we know, for example, most of the Pacific is a plain, because we have mapped all of this. One of the reasons being so that submarines will not suddenly end up running into the ground in.
Okay, so here we are. He's discussing the level of the submarine in relation to the ocean floor. Most shallow water operations are not conducted in an area where the submarine is going to be literally a few feet above the ocean floor, if it can be helped, due to depth constraint as well as position inaccuracy. Now, this is mainly in systems that use only one gyro navigator, or something like ship's ascend system, ship's inertial navigation system, or ESGN, electrostatically supported gyro navigator. Now, the thing is, dealing with the navigation, I looked at the charts. I helped plot our route. I helped make sure we know when we're getting too shallow, when we're getting really too shallow. We have, yellow and red sounding markers to let us know. We even mark out the sounding curves just so that way we don't stray too far from those areas. Now he talks about how the Pacific Ocean is mostly a flat plain. Yes, that is a fairly accurate understanding. However, it's not entirely accurate. The Navy has not only released information about the surfaces of the ocean floors for navigational purposes, they also have other charts that are highly classified that are maintained that way, so that way submarines and surface ships, if they choose to do it, can do what's called a precise bathymetric navigation fix. The areas they do these in are called PBNZ: Papa, Bravo, November, Zulu. They're navigational zones that dumping is prohibited. Even on surface charts, these areas are known as no dumping zones. There's a reason why, again, because we want the contours to remain relatively the same. And if things do change, when we conduct those types of fix operations, we can then radio back, hey, this has changed. We need to get a new survey done of this area. Now, again, the charts themselves are classified. We can't actually show you what they look like. Even if I wanted to, I could not show you what they look like. But just know that we do not operate any military craft, any military submarine that close, except for maybe deep submergence research vessels, such as like the bathyscaphe Trieste and things like that that we use to map out the Marianas Trench that the Navy was a part of. Going back to his illustration here, you see that it says direction must be perfectly parallel to maintain safe space. That's not entirely true either. There are instances where we do want to be pitched up or pitched down based upon what's going on, um, what's going on with our operation. Just as an example, normal excursions to periscope depths can be angled upwards, can have us angled upwards at a slight up degree, or what we call a bubble. You try to maintain that so that way we can keep a low profile under the water, but also so that way, if we have to, we can emergency dive in a situation where we're too close to a contact or whatever. All right. Enough of my rambling. Let's go on with this video.
Having problems like that. So a submarine can actually be like this a few feet off the ocean surface and remain that way as long as they know how deep it is. They have things aboard so that they can make sure they stay at that exact depth. So let's take a look at another picture here. We have a submarine here that's showing a cross section. Of course, this is CGI, but submarines also will tend to stay, generally speaking, 30 feet below the water. It varies a little, but let's use 30 feet as an average.
Okay. Now, I can't reveal too much about periscope depth operations, such as specific depths or anything like that. But how we measure our depth below sea level is not from the top of the submarine to the top of the surface of the water. It's actually the keel depth that we use. We have sensors that allow us to detect how deep we are based upon the sea pressure and how deep our keel, the main backbone of any ship. Now, this is why I'm doing this. Is not so much to punch holes in everything, but at the same time, understanding how a submarine operates and trying to make it simple is hard. Trying to get around classified information also is hard. How do I want to put this? Oh, okay. So, like I said, you see his description here is about 30 feet periscope depth. That's on the current classes of submarines that we use, not even close. The average draft or depth of most submarines keels is, a little deeper than 30 feet. Some of them a little less, but most of them are deeper than that. Now, given that from some submarines, you can go to like Jane's military books. It'll talk about submarines, Jane's ships, things like that. Talks about the public knowledge of information about submarines, such as average draft, keel depth, the height of the submarine from keel to top of the sail. That information is all unclassified, and that's fine. If you want to look into that, that's fine. I mean, I could do a quick Google search on that if I wanted to. But just know that, again, submarines don't measure their depth based upon how far they're submerged from under the water to the top of the submarine's sail. We measure from the keel down here at the bottom. So that way, when we run aground, if that happens, and again, it's an if, not when, because it has happened and it does happen. There are some famous incidents of running aground as well as hitting underwater sea mountains. So, continuing.
Sometimes a little bit more shallow, sometimes a little deeper, so that they can put a periscope up. They can put a periscope up, and then they can look around and see what's going on, see if there's any enemies around, see if there's any friendlies around, things like that. Sonar, as we're going to look at in a little bit, is one of the ways that a submarine can look under the water and shoot things out to see if there's other metal that comes back. For example, it's like sonar is underground radar. That's the best way to look at that. There are some differences, but I want to get mostly into the steering and how does a ship like this, a submarine
Sorry
ship
about
like
that.
this, stay?
So, sonar, yes, it is technically like underwater radar, except for that instead of pinging off of just metal, active sonar can ping off of just about anything that can return a reflection. This is why the Navy has restricted areas where they are not allowed to use active sonar at all, including a fathometer. Fathometers actually send a sound signal down and it bounces back off the ground and comes back up and tells you where the depth of the ocean floor is underneath you. Sonar mostly is used in a passive setting because active sonar not only tells you where other people are at, it tells other people where you're at. And by listening to things via passive sonar, you can actually follow and track them because sound is a great medium in which water is a great medium in which sound can travel through. I don't know if you've ever sat at the pool edge and had somebody sit underwater on the far side of the pool from you, and you just pop your knuckle, like, oh wait, maybe I can do it here, like that. That sounds like a high sharp pop to you and me sitting outside of the water, but under the water when you do it, has a little more bass to it, has a little more sound to it, and it'll travel quite far. And the lower the sound is, the deeper, the bassier the sound is, the further it will travel through the water. You can actually hear, just using an example from a movie, actually. Um, in The Hunt for Red October, um, prefer the book over the movie, but the movie is still good. Um, when Jonesy is teaching the young seaman how sonar works, the cob or chief of the boat comes in and starts giving Jonesy a hard time about listening to Pavarotti. And Jonesy's like, no, it's Paganini. Whatever, it's my sea story. I can tell it how I want. Anyways, they're talking about how Jones had put the the record sound, the tape sound, out into the ocean, was listening it to sonar. Well, the thing is that by putting out that active sound, it spreads throughout the oceans of the world. So not only is Jonesy hearing it and other boats elsewhere hearing it, but one boat all the way out in Pearl was hearing it too. Now, it's I'm not a sonar technician. I don't understand the full mathematical computations that they go through to figure out ranges based upon the sounds. I have a basic understanding of sonar. I was actually thinking about qualifying sonar watch. I thought that would have been a cool cross rate training exercise. But then we ended up going to the shipyard to convert from ballistic missile to guided missile submarine, and that kind of quashed that idea. But just know that ships, surface ships, and submarines, we do not like to put out active sonar, because it not only does it allow, you know, you to find somebody, it'll tell them where you're at. And we're called the silent service for a reason. We try not to emit any sound at all if we can help it. So back to Mr. Thrive and Survive.
20 feet under the water without coming up accidentally and surfacing or going down too far, so that when the captain wants to take a look around, he can't stick that up and see what's going on. So let's see how that works here in a minute. Now this gives you the different parts of a submarine, and you can look.
Okay, so this is a basic, unclassified description of a sturgeon class submarine. Now, not all submarines look like this. Many other submarines have the tall sail section, but they don't have what they're calling here sail planes, or what we know as fairwater planes in the submarine service. They're actually attached to the bow right over here, usually in this general area where it starts to form the cone around the sonar dome. I actually have a picture that I'm going to show later here. That's a cutaway of a Ohio Class submarine. But you'll also see that we also have the stern planes back here, right? These sail planes, as he's going to refer to them, and he actually refers to both as sail planes, but these are the sail planes. These are meant for depth keeping, controlling basically where you are in depth. The stern planes are used mainly to keep the bubble, keep our angle, how we need it to be kept. The planes back here on the stern planes, they are bigger. They have more surface area, and they create more drag, more lift on the system based upon how they're flexed. And I'll go over that a little bit later. But again, these fairwater planes, that are sail planes as he calls them, that are on the front top sail of the submarine, which keeps it from spinning, are used for controlling the depth, and they are smaller. Now, the rudder also plays a part in how we keep depth as well, because if we are going at a high speed and we do a hard rudder, we can actually pivot the submarine and help dive the submarine. As part of an emergency deep, we can also get a helm order to hard right, hard left, rudder, steady on course, depending on what the area is. But again, I just want to get this clarification out there before he screws it up. Sail planes mean what's on top of the sail, or they're also known as bow planes when they're on the bow. Then you have the stern planes. They are back aft. Again, he's going to often refer to these as sail planes. They are not.
Some of these things up online and see for yourself. These actually act much like an aircraft does. And we're going to talk about aircraft in this video as well. But the main thing I want you to pay attention here is two things. I want you to understand how the submarine reaches a certain depth and then can stay at that depth forever without coming up or going down, because that is the end of a submarine. If a submarine is spotted, it can end its life. We're going to show a destroyer here, as you saw. Sailplanes. This is what I want to get into right here. Sailplanes, okay, are located usually.
As you can see, he's highlighting both, but there is a difference, like I explained.
On the top front part or front middle part of a submarine, and also in the rear. We're going to look at the rear in particular, but just know that there is some trim that they can do up front to make this more exact. For example, if they want to go down at a 1 degree angle at a time, they can set these very precisely today so that they go down 1 degree angle per whatever feet they travel, or per mile, whatever. These stern plates here are what we're going to look at, but the one, and of course you have the propeller behind here which drives it. These rudders, they are used mostly for turning left and right. We're not going to deal with that in this video. We're just going to deal with going up and down in the water. So we're going to see a submarine chasing a supposed enemy destroyer, and we want to figure out how can the submarine possibly stay at a certain depth and not go down anymore. Two things have to happen. Unlike things that are above the ground, like an aircraft, which has to overcome, according to science, gravity. Okay, speaking of airplanes.
Okay. Similar to the airplane, we have to account for gravity. He's going to talk about how we don't, but at the same time, we do. I would know because the gyroscopes we use are attuned to the gravity at the center of the Earth. Just like an airplane, we don't have to keep nosing down to, and actually, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and show you what I mean here. So, unlike just like an airplane, we don't have to keep putting our nose down to go around the curvature of the Earth. We just go straight. We can keep level, like he said. Well, all conditions right, if we ran from the North Pole down to Australia, as long as there was no other land masses, no other mountains or undersea mountains or anything like that, we could just cruise right along. Don't have to adjust anything. That people don't understand that gravity, while it is a force, it is not like me grabbing onto this bottle of water. Here. It's not like me grabbing on this bottle of water, and as I decide to flip it, the water is going down. Or if I swirl it, the water doesn't go up. Gravity doesn't physically pull you. It doesn't have a hold of you. It just has a reaction. It's a reaction to the mass of the Earth. That's what it is. The Earth is a massive spheroid, oblate spheroid, with its center of mass in the center of the Earth. I'm trying not to go off too much on a tangent here, but I'm actually going to let his whole video play. I was originally planning to skip past this, but again, the whole point of this is that his video has some glaring holes in it, that because he's never served on a submarine, he doesn't understand. As far as I can tell, he's never served on a submarine. If he has, wasn't in the navigation side of things at all. He never got to learn how to do things. So back over to the video, and we will play.
Let's take a look at the contrast here, and part of why I'm doing this video.
And I'm going to let this go through all the way.
The problem on a globe, according to those who believe in the true flat Earth model, is the fact that if a plane above a ball is traveling, let's say 35,000 feet, and maintains level according to its gyroscope, it will over time, let me switch the picture here, it will over time, as it's flying level, and this is an excellent video here. I will put a card up here right now so that you can go check out this video. It's fantastic. It's called Flat Earth Proof number 8, and the channel name is called Feed Your Mind. In any case, let's do a little graphic here so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's assume this airplane is at 35,000 feet cruising altitude. He goes into great detail to show how gyroscopes on an aircraft are set to perfectly level when they are level on the ground. They have to show any deviation from that. When they get up, they take off, they go immediately up to the cruising altitude. Again, we're going to assume 35,000 feet in this example right here. So what we say is, if you're on a ball, that you would fly out into space, because you would have to constantly be angling down to cover the curve of the Earth. Now, the answer that is given by those who want to believe in the fallacy of the ball is that the ever magical gravity is the reason. Somehow gravity knows that this plane is at 35,000 feet and knows to keep it at 35,000 feet. It has this knowledge.
Okay. I was going to let it go through, but every time I hear that, I want to face palm. I really do. Gravity doesn't know anything, it is just an external force that acts upon us. Okay? As long as you have enough thrust, your airplane at 35,000 feet will stay at 35,000 feet. It also will not, the Earth will not pass under it if it is flying east to west. That's not how it works. You are inside the atmosphere. The atmosphere is pulled into the Earth by gravity. Ergo, if you are inside the atmosphere, you are going to be affected by gravity. It is going to push against you. Hence why we have the winds, among other things, along with solar heating to create winds, but that's another topic for another time. The same thing goes on underneath the ocean. Yes, we can obtain what's called neutral buoyancy, which he goes into detail about, and I will cover it then. But we also do not rise to the earth, or basically surface, and breach out of the water because of going in a straight line. That's what we would do. You have to, in order to understand the earth, you have to understand all of the things that happen on and around it and inside the atmosphere of it, and even under the earth's crust, where we're sitting on a bed of magma. But that's another topic for another time as well.
My thing is, how does it not know it's at 40,000 feet? Sometimes it is. How does it know not to keep it at 40,000 feet? In any case, they say gravity somehow keeps the plane from flying off and keeps it at 35,000 feet no matter how far it goes around the globe. So that is the plane argument. Gravity is the reason. Let's go back to our example and see how that all ties in. The submarine doesn't deal with gravity. The submarine deals with buoyancy and buoyancy only. What the submarine will do is it will blow air out of its tanks and become buoyancy neutral, so that if no other forces were acting upon the submarine whatsoever, it would just sit there. It wouldn't sink, it wouldn't float, it's just buoyancy neutral. In essence, it becomes the same buoyancy as the ocean around it.
Okay, so yes, he is technically right. That is how a submarine operates. A submarine, in order to float, fills its ballast tanks full of air. High pressured air pushes water out of them. We also keep our trim level, basically the bubble level, by using trim tanks. I'm going to go over here to this diagram of an Ohio Class submarine. As you can see, it's basic understanding of how it's working. You got the sonar dome, which is encapsulated around with the ballast tanks here, and you also have ballast tanks back here that fill with seawater to allow us to submerge. As you can see, we have fairwater planes. You can also see that we have stern planes. You can also see that we have stabilizers to help keep us stable. The old Sturgeon classes did not. Now, you can also see that we have various masts and antennas and things like that. But what he fails to grasp here about buoyancy and the density of the water, and he does briefly touch upon this, about the salinity and the temperature of the water, that also affects sonar and the sounds that we can and cannot hear. But sorry, again, problem with doing this live is if the brain farts, you can't move on from it. You can't edit it out. But what he fails to understand with it is how it all works. He keeps showing this diagram of this experimental sub design to launch missiles. I'm assuming it's supposed to be something like the SSBN type submarine or some sort of special ops boats with the X configuration of the stern planes and rudder. Makes absolutely no sense to me, but I'm not exactly a hydrodynamic engineer. What I'd like to show you now is actually the video of a submarine, an Ohio Class submarine, conducting a normal dive. I'm going to back it up a bit here, all the way to the beginning. And as you can see, it's submerging, or it's surface transiting, and you're going to see the vents open. You're going to see what that looks like, and you're also going to hear it. It's a sound that you'll never forget. And there we go. That mist is air being sucked in as the air is escaping. It is being blown. Fine water particles are being blown out. Now, what the officer of the deck is doing right now as the periscope operator is he is letting everyone in control know that the vents forward are open, the vents aft are open. He's watching for any contacts coming in our way. The diving officer of the watch is counting out depth. 50 feet, 52 feet, 54 feet, etc., 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 down. The officer deck is also watching for the aft deck to be submerged or awash, which he will call. And then as the sail is going down, you're going to see the fairwater plane. It's hard to see because of this angle. Even if I fully exposed or fully screened it, you still wouldn't see it very well. But the angle of the fairwater planes would be going down. The angle of the stern planes would look like the front edge is going to be pointing up, and that's to help pivot it down. Oh, I didn't mean to pause it. Now, this is an experience very few people get to do, and you never forget it from your first time when you hear officer of the deck, last man down the hatch is secure, and the chief of the watch and diving officer watch report that all hatches sealed, red light, or a green light on the board. Green light means all hatches are shut. We also refer to it as a Christmas tree because of the original design of it. Anyways, and as you see, it takes a while to get a boat this size. We call them boats, even though they are technically classified as ships now. It takes a long time for a boat this size to get underwater. Now you see just the periscope from the front end. You still see the top of the rudder there. And now it slips under. Periscope's going down, down, down. Still there. Still there. And scope's under, lowering periscope, whatever number they have. And then the wake is gone. That is, I don't care how old this video is. It will keep getting views for me. It's already at 81,000 views. I will gladly keep going to that video. Now back to Mr. Thrive and Survive's video. And remind me, I got to get that videos in my description down below.
Now, that can get complex.
Now, again, we have to account for gravity as well as the density of the water and our buoyancy. We can adjust the water throughout the ship via, and I'm going back to the image here. We have various trim tanks throughout the ship. We have a forward trim tank, and after trim tank we have aux trims and things like that. We also have sanitation tanks, potable water tanks, all sorts of stuff that help. We can pump fluid around. We can pump more water in, pump more water out. We can change these things, and that is complicated, and I agree with him. We don't need to go into the full detail of that. but you have to have an understanding of that in order to make sure that you understand how the submarine operates underwater.
Temperatures of the water can be involved, salinity, different factors. We're going to try to keep it simple here. So, if you turn a propeller on and you're buoyancy neutral, the submarine will obviously move, but how do you keep it from going down or up? Even though it's buoyancy neutral, if you have your sails off even by a little bit, this is going to dive or come up. Now, let me cover real quickly if a submarine needs to rise very rapidly or sink very rapidly, they change the buoyancy also. They change the sails and they change the buoyancy. If they need to dive from the surface,
Well, as you remember, I just showed you a video of them diving from the surface, and it can take a long time. But part of that is also helping with the trim tanks submerging. Now, I want to show you an emergency surface here. Um, these are always fun. I share these videos on Facebook all the time when they come up. But let's just do a quick Google search here. Emergency surface. Spell emergency, right? See, surface submarines. All right. Come on. Trying to find a decent one here. All right, we'll go with the USS Columbia, as always. It's the most popular one you see. It's the one you most often see on TV, in movies and things like that, because it's such a short clip, but it's so awesome at the same time. So we're going to go back to share application windows, emergency surface, and this one right here. Another video that I will watch time and time again. If you love roller coasters, you would love to do something like that. That's what's called an emergency surface or an emergency blow. Because what we're doing is we are literally blowing high pressure air into the ballast tanks to rise to the surface, as quickly as we can. All right, back to Mr. Thrive and Survive.
well, let me go and let's take a look at that. Now, this is a little crude here, I admit it, but I'm putting a larger sail on the back here to show you. Now, let's assume that
Stern
the
planes.
bubbles have been blown out here to where this is buoyancy neutral. And all of a sudden, this submarine finds, let's say, an enemy ship or destroyer in the distance. How is that shown? Um, well, let's just go ahead and show it here. So now forget about this cursor here. I've recorded this so many times, it's crazy. As this goes down, the rudder, the sail, the sail.
Okay, again, I'm being picky here about terms, and I really shouldn't be. I mean, I've said it enough times. It's the stern planes, but I want you to take note that he actually understands the
As
concept
the
fairly
sail is
well. Because as you can see, he's pointing at where the back end of it is dropping underneath, causing it to pivot to come down. So kudos to him for actually getting it right. But again, I am being a little nitpicky. And again, is the qualified submariner in me. That's the logo that you see when I don't show my video. That's my avatar, basically. To earn the submarine warfare insignia, you have earned the respect of your brothers, at least at the time when I was in. Now that we have the women, now brothers and sisters, now that we've got plenty of women qualifying submarines. We have to take, we have to understand the physics behind all this. And it goes beyond just buoyancy and density.
pointed downward, it forces the water up as it's moving forward, forces it up in the back, which points the front of the submarine down. So as we continue this, you see the submarine goes down. Again, it's buoyancy neutral. So because the propeller's working and the um, sail in the back is pointed down, it's not at 90 degrees. Let's say they want to go down at a 20-degree rate. Well, they would tilt this down at 20 degrees and the front would go down by 20 degrees. That's why it's important to have it buoyancy neutral. You don't have to have all kind of fancy calculations to say, oh, where we have a little slight tendency to float, so we got to make this slightly more than 20 degrees. No, this thing is all done with precision. So as you can
Now, that is not entirely accurate either. There are times where we are, due to salinity in one set of tanks versus salinity in the other set of tanks, just because of how large a submarine is. They mean anywhere from 300 feet long to 500 feet, 560 feet long for the Ohio Class submarines. We have to. You can literally have spots of the ocean where one side is actually saltier than the other side, and that's literally, you know, 500 feet long. Well, if it's less salty, it's has less salinity. It is less dense. Therefore, it is lighter. Now, we can do one of two things. We can, depending on the levels of our various tanks inside, we can um, we can actually shift water around. We can move if that doesn't work. If say that aft trim tank is full and all the other tanks along with it are full, trying to balance out this weight, we can then start moving goods from the front end of the ship to the back end of the ship to try and help offset the balance. It is more than just water. It is more than just the salinity of the water that controls whether or not we're neutrally buoyant. Another thing that can also, another thing that can cause all this as well is moving people around on the ship. Excuse me. You can have you can have everything perfect, same salinity in all the tanks. You could have the trim perfect. Then all of a sudden, you get a new diving officer of the watch just qualified, and we could do what's called a trim up party. And it's not the same effect that we have now that we did back in the days of the old diesel boats, like World War II era diesel boats, where you literally can move 20 people from one end of the ship to the other, and it will literally tilt. But if we need to get down further, we could actually have people move forward to help put some more weight over there. It would take a lot of people, but you could still do it. We have to understand that there are ways to also move water around port and starboard. You can literally have so much stuff on. You can balance out your stores load, and if you don't balance it out throughout the rest of the patrol, you can actually start to list to one side or the other. That's also where the various trim tanks on subsequent trim tanks and auxiliary tanks are. I know I'm going really in depth here. I'm trying not to, but it's the submarine in me trying to correct everything.
see now, there's no blowing out of the tanks of air or water. That's very important. Now, as you can see, this is back to a neutral position, 90 degrees to the surface. In this case, the ship continues now in a straight level position.
Okay, now this this is where it's really getting to me on here is when he paused on this. With the sail at zero inclination, the sub being buoyancy neutral, the sub will remain perfectly parallel to the water's surface and remain at whatever depth. Okay, that's bugging me. It's actually spelled wrong. DEP is in Papa. th, but again, nitpicking. Will remain at whatever depth it begins with, so long as the sail remains at 0 degrees. It will not rise or fall to the surface of the sea. That is not true. That is totally not true. The sea is not perfectly calm and flat and level at all. Anywhere on the earth, whether this earth is globe or flat, the seas are not flat at all. They are in constant motion. They're constantly moving. There are waves all over the place. And just because you don't see them doesn't mean we don't feel them. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been up in the North Pacific or North Atlantic during the winter time, it is not exactly the best place to be if you have a queasy stomach or you get motion sickness very easily. Why on earth you would want to be on a ship or a submarine in those areas if you can't handle the rocking of a ship back and forth, side to side, at degrees varying anywhere from a few degrees to as much as 20 to 30 degrees side to side. It's one of those things you have to account for that. And yet, even in a simple understanding of a submarine and how it works, you still have to account for how the ocean reacts. I can be driving along at 5 knots as a helmsman in control of both steering the ship left and right and controlling the depth up and down. That we could actually, even at a zero trim, a perfectly balanced trim, I can still rise or fall no matter what if I am not paying attention. Computers don't drive these things, people do. I was at 19 years old driving one of these boats. What does that tell you? Now they've changed some of these things. They're actually done by the chiefs, because they try to integrate as much of it into one person as possible. But that's a story for another time. They've even changed the periscopes now. I mean, when I qualified periscope operator, I was one of the few people on the boat that could wear contacts underway. You know why? Because I needed it for my job. The Navy paid for it. But you have to be able to look through the scope, be able to tell range to targets. You have to be able to scan the horizon for anything and everything. And we'd also take bearings and pictures of the moons and things like that. Anyways, that's what I wanted to say about this. No matter what you're doing, you always have to make those adjustments, and you can't just let it go and do whatever. There's no autopilot. Let me rephrase that. There's no autopilot during normal operations that we can use. There's some things that, there's some platforms that have something like an autopilot, but it's still not an autopilot. But that's getting into a deep rabbit hole that could lead to classified material being leaked out, and I'm not going to be the one to do that. No, that's right. I forgot that he actually had no sound here. I could have just talked over it until the sound. So
Now, I'm spending a lot of time right here, guys, because this is the most important point of this entire video. The submarine gets itself into a position of what I'm calling buoyancy neutral. What exactly does that mean? That means that left on its own, this submarine would just sit here. Imagine it's a nice still ocean. There is no gravity pulling it down, and the buoyancy of the water is not pushing it up. There is a perfect mixture of air and water in the tanks, in what's called the ballast tanks in the submarine, so that there are no forces of gravity, or better yet, since you're in the ocean, buoyancy. It is neutral. That's why I'm calling it buoyancy neutral, so that you have this sail and the other sails, when you have those at 0 degrees or parallel, as long as your rudder is moving to push it, it will stay parallel. If you start 10 inches under the sea, forget about wave heights and things like that. It's a perfectly calm sea, let's say. If you're 10 feet under when you start, 35 hours later, as long as you haven't changed the trim on this, you're still going to be 10 feet under. This is exactly what submarines want to get to. Again, why? Because this blowing out of bubbles and changing the ballast in the tanks creates noise. It makes it easy for the enemy to find a submarine. Most submarines today in the military are nuclear powered, so that there is no combustion engines like that that are going to make sounds. You've heard the term probably, at least in the United States, run silent, run deep. So,
Okay. Since he brings up the movie, and I agree with him, it is a very good movie. Run silent, run deep is not meant as a nuclear term. It is actually meant to the diesel world to avoid depth charges. It's meant to move. You work as quietly as you can, making no noise. Nowadays, the nuclear submarines, we actually have what are called floating deck plates. They are not attached hard to the hull, which means if you have some piece of equipment like a pump that pumps in water from out in the ocean or moves water around the ship, the submarine, the vibrations from from the motor of that pump is not going to vibrate out into the ocean, helping us stay silent. The but to think that we actually make no noise is, how do I want to put it? Is like believing the earth is not flat. Or I mean, sorry. What I mean to say is that believing that we make no noise underwater is like believing that the earth is flat. Neither case is true. We are making sounds all the time. We try to minimize those sounds by what we call the sound silencing program. I don't know if any of you have worked in a like a Domino's or a grocery store where they have the giant walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers. Most people, they slam those doors shut because they're heavy. You know, it's like wham, trying to shut it in one go without having to do it. On a submarine, you're trained to hold the handle for that door, gently shut it, and let it latch, and and just give it a little wiggle to make sure that it doesn't move. Anything that can swing freely is either tied down or is held um, by a locking mechanism, basically like just a little clamp. You know, among other things to help keep things shut. I mean, even when we're closing hatches and we're on the surface and getting ready to submerge, we still close things quietly. When I was underway on the USS Michigan, we had an issue with some of our hydraulic oil um, for the fairwater planes, the ones up on top of the sail, was leaking into the actual ladder area. Don't even remember what we call it other than the sail. Anyways, it's the crawl space in the sail that is still waterproofed to allow us up and down while we're submerged to be able to do things in there. We would have to go up there and use a shop vac and run hoses from a third level, and in some cases, even as far as lower level, to gather the oil and then dump it back into the system to be filtered and put back through. We'd have to do that 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes we were doing it every day, and that sucked. Once we got back into port, we were able to get that problem fixed, but it makes life miserable. It makes sound silencing hard. Hence why, why I'm doing this video is there's little things that he's presenting that are wrong that need to be corrected. And we got 6 minutes left. Hopefully, I don't have to do this too much more. I have watched it. I'm not gonna lie. This isn't like a live first time debunking like we do on movie night on Sci Strike's channel. But I want to but I want to give. I've been wanting to do this. I've been itching to do this one. So
If they want to change by 10 degrees, if they want to go down 10 degrees per so many feet, they will change this to 10 degrees. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. This is extremely important concept to get. There is no gravity here, and in essence, really,
the sub's depth is reduced to a purely mechanical system, eliminating outside forces. Wrong. I've already discussed this. The ocean is in constant movement, constant flux. You have set and drift. You have waves. I mean, you have different salinity and varieties of, and even temperature depths that do affect this. So to say that eliminating outside forces, no. We try not to go too in depth anymore. I'm already an hour into this video, and I have. I was hoping not to go over 40 minutes, but it is what it is. That's the joy of doing a live one. You cannot, in any system, reduce to eliminating all the outside forces on a submarine unless you put it in a vacuum chamber with no liquid in it. And then it's not a submarine at that point, it's a spaceship. Which theoretically, a submarine could be a spaceship. They are watertight, which means they are airtight. So, lose a lot of heat through the hull, but that's an entirely different thing.
there is no buoyancy. It's perfectly neutral. Let's continue. So hopefully that explains how that works. Now, if the ship wants to go back up, they just do the opposite. They would just point this up and the ship would go up. There's no additional noise added. That's an important thing. There's no additional noise blowing out of bubbles and things like that. So this buoyancy neutral is a very important concept to have and to understand how the sails cause this to go up and down is extremely important. Okay, let's look at a real life scenario. We've explained everything very buoyancy neutral here. Once the destroyer suspects there may be a submarine nearby, he will ping to see if the destroyer is out there. That might go something like this.
Again, not being a sonar technician, but understanding the basics of sonar, it is hard to be outside of sonar range of anything. That's like being outside of radar range of things. Unless you're built to deflect instead of reflect a sound wave, you are detectable. Yes, as the sound goes out further, it bounces back at a quieter level, which means that it's harder to detect you. But the distance that they would detect, that the distances involved here to stay out of that range, if we were to scale it, would be quite far. Quite far. Talking thousands of, talking if not hundreds, if not thousands of miles away with active sonar.
So what he wants to do is he wants to maintain a distance behind where the pinging can reach him. And it can get a little bit more complex than that, but let's make it simple.
Also, a submarine does not attack at such a shallow depth. There's a reason for that, and I'm actually going to go to the. Actually, let me copy really quick to. And there we go. Submarine at Periscope Depth images. This is one of my favorite pictures. Does that look like a submarine to you? Well, obviously with the periscopes, but I mean, do you not agree that that is quite literally? Oh, come on, you. a submarine visible from the sky. This was taken out of a plane that was tracking a submarine. It's not hard to spot a submarine in the ocean, especially at periscope depth. A trained lookout can do this. Heck, the Surface Navy trains 18, 19, 20-year-olds to do this. But anyways, back to Mr. Thrive and Survive's animation.
What he also wants to do is he doesn't want to fall behind or gain on him because of that. He doesn't want to fall behind, of course, and lose him. And he doesn't want to come into his ping range. So to ensure that, what he does is he stays just below the surface, as you can see here, and he's got his sails set at 0, just like we showed, and he's buoyancy neutral, so he doesn't have to make any noises, and he just moves through the water. And well, let's see how that works. So he chases this, and sometimes, guys, these chases can go on not only for miles and miles, but days at a time. So let's take a look how that would look. Now that we're going to put it in motion, he wants to stay just below, so he can be at periscope depth as the destroyer is moving on by. And this goes on and on, or depending how long. Oh, wait a minute, he's starting to come up here. It looks like. So maybe we don't have everything set at 0. Let's go ahead and check that. Okay, I think I've got everything set here now. So again, we're running this on the globe model. It should work because we don't have gravity or buoyancy that's in any kind of effect with us. We've got our rudder set at 0. We start the animation. He's at about 30 feet below sea level so that he can stick his periscope up if he needs to. He's staying outside of the range of the ping. And shoot, he's back up there again. Let's take a look at that. Okay, guys, what I did here was I put a level on here so that we can make sure that he is straight and everything. I think we got it now, so let's run the animation one more time and show you how this should work. There we go. All right, he's about 30 feet periscope depth. Destroyer's moving. He's staying out of range of the ping. And he continues on and on. I'll be darned. He's actually coming up again. Hold on.
Okay, what I've done is I have zoomed in. I put him right at the surface of the water, which we know is flat, and I put a line above him. Now let's go ahead and zoom all the way out. Oh, can you see the problem, guys? Can you see the problem on the globe?
See, the water is not flat on a globe. It has to curve to go along with the ball. So if you go ahead and
Oh,
let's go ahead and put another line.
even better, I just realized I had my mic muted that entire time. I'm going to back this up a little bit, even though I don't want to.
And
Okay.
I put a line above him. And let's go ahead and zoom all the way out. Oh.
Here, just for you guys. This is what I'm talking about. Mr. Thrive and Survive. I can't believe I actually muted my microphone, and this is what I said was epic. You cannot debunk a system without accounting for its system. You cannot take out the external forces just because you don't agree with what they say and say, oh no, this doesn't work, it's debunked. Gravity does work. The systems inside a submarine, especially the ones that you have been showing to launch missiles, have to have highly accurate understanding of where they're at. These gyroscopes that they use are very, very accurate. They also account for gravitational distortions in the Earth from various metals, various other minerals and deposits that are in the Earth's crust that change the way the way that the gyroscopes operate. Also, Also, you have to have an understanding. You have to understand what you're talking about before you can say something disproves something. I don't sit here and say, airplanes don't work because reason X. Let's say airplanes don't work because they don't flap their wings. Because that would totally be me discounting the fact that speed plus the angle of the wing creates a lift. That's how airplanes work. That's how they get up and get airborne. Yet, you sit here and tell me that a submarine operates in the ocean, and if it's neutrally buoyant, it will go perfectly straight no matter what. You're totally ignoring set and drift, the currents of the ocean. You're ignoring the waves, the rocking of the ocean. You're ignoring what will happen during storm season. Heck, even a gentle breeze can create pretty decent waves out in the middle of the ocean. And yet, you're going to sit here and tell me that the water is flat and not curved, and that if the water is curved, it is not flat. Why? I would love to sit down and talk to you about this, Mr. Thrive and Survive. I could go on for hours on submarines and their operations and how they work. I can even explain to you the basic terms of how the nuclear reactor works. I can explain to you how we convert seawater into oxygen, how we make salt water into fresh water for drinking and for bathing in and washing our clothes. I can even talk to you how we scrub out CO2 and all this other stuff and how we mount it into the atmosphere. I can do all sorts of things if you want. I have no problem. But you also can't talk to me and tell me that this right here, this picture that you're using, this animation, proves the Earth is flat. I'm going back to screen sharing now that I'm almost done ranting. Stupid computer. Mental note, get a mouse. The joys of using a laptop. This right here, Mr. Thrive and Survive, what you're talking about right here is utter preposterous BS. You don't know what you're talking about at all. You're going to sit here and tell me for a fact that because the Earth is curved, this submarine should go straight out of the water, and by the time it's at this arrow, it should be flying? That's what you're telling me. Or that in order to maintain this depth on this curve, that I have to adjust the fair water planes, not sail, fair water planes, and the stern planes. Now I know I've been nitpicking about terms, but it has just driven me over the absolute top that you would willfully disgrace the profession that I did. You would willfully disgrace the people that I served with. That you would willfully disgrace the military in this fashion. I mean, come on now.
Can you see the problem, guys? Can you see the problem on the globe? See, the water is not flat on a globe. It has to curve to go along with the ball. So if you go ahead and let's go ahead and put another line in there. Look at this. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little more if we can. Look at this right here. Look at this. See, he's eventually going to come on up and out of the water. Has to happen that way. Has to happen. If it's on a globe model, submarines obviously do not work.
Bull. Just utter bull. I cannot believe you would do this. That you would willfully do this.
They cannot work. Because if the water is curved, which it has to be on a ball, a submarine could never maintain its level. There is no gravity involved here. Look it up everywhere.
There is gravity involved, and level does not mean flat. Okay? Do you understand me?
They become buoyancy neutral, and they do that for more than one reason. Not to be caught in war is a main reason. But as you drag this out, as you can see, the further you would go, the more the submarine would surface if he has his rudders at 90 degrees. There is absolutely...
Not rudders, planes. Planes. Oh, just like you think the Earth is.
Absolutely no compensation for a curved ball. Ask anybody that's been on a submarine.
Wait, I have been. I served. As a matter of fact, my avatar that I use before I start every single one of my shows is the U.S. Navy submarine warfare insignia for the Dolphins. The people who have earned those warfare insignias are my brothers and sisters.
The trim is put to 0 degrees. And so if you're 30 feet under the water and you go 10 miles chasing a submarine, well, guess what? You're going to come up 66 feet, aren't you?
Actually, if you're 30 feet under the water, you're surfaced.
Well out of the water. So just like the airplane example, except this time nobody can use gravity as the excuse.
Actually, I can. Gravity acts on it. You can just counterbalance it by the fact that water is denser than most vessels that run on its surface. And in order to maintain a neutrally buoyant system on a submarine, you fill tanks with water. If I fill tanks with water, I'm going to have negative buoyancy, but there's a point when that negative buoyancy becomes neutrally buoyant. What happens to that? Oh, if it's neutrally buoyant, it floats in water. If you've ever submerged a cup in a bathtub or even a pool where the whole thing is full of air, what happens? It shoots up because it is positively buoyant. There is a point where you can actually get the right balance of air to the right balance of water inside that cup where it will literally just float there. As a matter of fact, the old diving bells that we used to use operate on the same principle.
You can't use it, guys. I'm sorry. You can't use it with this. It's all buoyancy.
Oh, however, I'm equally sure that cognitive disorders will come up with something. No, it's not. Cognitive disorders come up with something to prove how submarines work. It's cognitive disorders such as yourself that come up with something to disprove how this works in reality. Until you've been there, until you've gone and done what I've done, you don't get to tell me how I perceive the world.
And that's the end of this story. The Earth is flat. This is a slam dunk. It just...
No, this is you trying to do a 360 tilt-a-whirl and banging the ball on the back of the rim and having it fly out in the middle of the dunk contest for the NBA.
Is submarines could not function on a curved ball. There's no...
They can and they do.
way. The calculations would be unbelievable because they have different speeds and things like
The calculations are all right.
that are traveling. Take care, guys. Bye.
I
We
didn't
got
want to
an
do that.
email.
That's the next video I'm going to work on. However, like I said, Mr. Thrive and Survive, you don't know what you're talking about. Go educate yourself on how a submarine really works. Go and educate yourself on how anything in the world works with physics, because obviously you don't understand. I mean, I don't even have a physics degree. The highest level of science I completed was biology, high school biology. It's not hard to go and pick up a textbook and read it and understand it. I mean, heck, if you look right here, I have 5 course topics from MIT that are free to take. Excuse me, sorry. But anyways, back to my point. Just to recap here, Mr. Thrive and Survive, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no clue what you're talking about when it comes to submarines. I don't even know everything about submarines, and yet, because I served, and if you understood what it took to qualify, and maybe the next time I do a video like this, on the next one, I'll bring up my submarine qualification card and show you the information that I needed to know. Maybe then you'll understand what it takes to operate a submarine. I just, wow. Yeah, wow. The fact that you would undermine our military, the people who serve on a submarine, and tell them that what they do doesn't work on a round Earth, when that's exactly what we do, how we navigate, how we... Yeah, I mean, come on, man. You just obviously don't know. I'm more than willing to talk to you about this. I will have a live hangout with you if you like. We can go over your video point by point. Again, you and me. We can go over another video if you want, point by point. You can tell me where I'm wrong, and I can tell you where you're wrong, because I know I'm right. I have served on a submarine. I have done this. Have you? As far as I can tell, you haven't. Prove me I'm wrong. Thank you for watching. For those of you that have stuck around this long, sorry that I ranted, especially with my mic off. That's so not me. But then again, I'm not used to having a mute button anymore. So, alrighty. Thank you for watching this. Again, flat Earth is not real. The round Earth is. We live on a sphere, an oblate spheroid. It is not hard to understand the concept of gravity and accept the fact that gravity exists. I shared to SciStrike earlier today on Twitter a video of exactly how gravity can be displayed to work on a tight woven net. Even something like a trampoline, if you have one in the backyard, go put a bowling ball out there and then go put a billiards ball out there and watch the billiard ball go around and around. Seems to work and explain how things work, doesn't it? The more velocity you have on something, the more constant velocity you can have on something, the longer it'll stay in orbit. Anyways, this is Jay. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful night, and go check out SciStrike's Movie Night. It's a more adult show, and if you have kids that you want to share with, watch SciStrike and Andy's Sunday Science Show.